This piece began as a short. It was supposed to present a bit of comic book trivia that had been circulating for a while. It was supposed to be an easy topic, something that could be easily condensed into 60 seconds, but it wasn't meant to be. In fact, it turned into a rabbit hole investigation to discover whether or not a Scrooge McDuck comic inspired the iconic sequence that opens Raiders of the Lost Ark. So let's begin with the basics. Uncle Scrooge No. 7 from September 1954 by the legendary artist/writer Carl Barks contains the story The Seven Cities of Cibola. The story involves Uncle Scrooge and the extended Duck family searching for a lost treasure. Naturally, the no-good Beagle Boys are hot on their trail, looking to steal whatever they find. Anyway, the Ducks discover the lost city and all its treasure, which brings us to the important part. There's a huge jade statue on a pedestal, but it's discovered to be booby-trapped. Removing it will dislodge a boulder that will knock over a pillar and the entire cave will collapse. Naturally, the Beagle Boys aren't so cautious. They remove the statue and mayhem ensues. At a glance, this setup sounds remarkably like the opening scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark. For a refresh, in Raiders, Indiana Jones attempts to remove a golden idol sitting on a booby-trapped platform. However, he fails and a large boulder is released. He has to outrun it in order to survive. There are some noticeable differences though. The Beagle Boys don't try to outrun the boulder, they try to outrun the collapsing of the cave. And in Raiders, the cave is merely sealed off by the boulder, it doesn't collapse. Also, Indy has to dodge darts, jump over a pit, slide under a closing door, and then outrun a boulder. But that's being nitpicky. The major element, a booby-trapped idol and a rolling boulder, are the same. Side note, every single article mentioning this connection only ever shows the one page with the Beagle Boys fleeing. However, it's preceded by an equally relevant page that's never mentioned. Interesting. Who first noticed this similarity and when it first became a popular piece of trivia is unknown. At least, I couldn't find a source, so it's possibly a fan theory that's been around for a while. One of the earliest mentions that could be found came from Comic Book Urban Legends Revealed from December 14, 2007. In that column, Brian Cronin spoke to Edward Summer, the author of the book Uncle Scrooge, His Life and Times. This book, published in 1981, contains an introduction by George Lucas. Notably, this collection contains the Seven Cities of Cibola, and Summer states that Lucas, at some indeterminate time, told him the boulder scene was a homage to Scrooge McDuck. If that were presented in a court of law, an attorney would say, "Objection, hearsay, Your Honor." The judge would sustain that objection, and the statement would be stricken from the record. This isn't actual confirmation that Lucas was paying homage to that Scrooge McDuck scene. It's something somebody claims Lucas said. For the record, Summer was an acquaintance of George Lucas. In the early 70s, they opened the Super Snipe Comic Art Gallery together, although it's uncertain exactly how involved Lucas was with the gallery. Comic book art, especially Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon work, appeared to be Lucas's main interest, but the store also existed to sell prints of Star Wars-related artwork. Summer also interviewed Lucas in 1978 for a brief segment concerning comic books. Like with his introduction to the Uncle Scrooge book, Lucas speaks very abstractly about comics. His focus is on the artwork and its importance as a snapshot of the era it was produced. He likes the ideas and the imagination in comics, but he doesn't explicitly cite examples. His opinions are very generalized, so to speak. Notably, during a 3-part interview for Star Wars Insider that ran in issues 139 to 141, Summer had this to say about the introduction Lucas wrote. "I did an interview over the phone with George. We edited it down, exchanged it a couple of times, and that became the introduction to the book. So, from the sounds of it, Summer got some talking points from Lucas, he put them all together in a brief essay, and Lucas signed off on it." Understandably, circa 1980, Lucas was probably way too busy to have any more involvement than that. Overall, this doesn't project the image that Lucas is highly passionate about comics, or Uncle Scrooge in particular, although he has, at the very least, a passing familiarity with the comic. In an article published by Screen Rant on September 6, 2020, there's some rather questionable reporting. The iconic boulder scene was attributed to Steven Spielberg's love of the Scrooge McDuck story. This is contradicted a few paragraphs later when the aforementioned Urban Legends column is cited, which was focused on Lucas, not Spielberg. Again, the Urban Legends column is cited in an article published on Warped Factory on January 12, 2021. Interestingly, near the end of that article, there's more detail. Lucas apparently admits to this homage during the 2003 DVD extra making the trilogy. Boy, I sure hope this doesn't lead me to saying this is some sloppy reporting and shaky conjecture again. The video of this DVD extra can be found on YouTube, so I watched the entire 2-hour and 7-minute documentary looking for Lucas making this admission. Unsurprisingly, Lucas says nothing resembling what's reported. In fact, during the portion where the boulder segment is discussed, Spielberg says it was his idea, and he never mentions Scrooge McDuck. Nor is the sequence mentioned as a homage at any point during the entire video. As a side note, this led me to a transcript of a story conference between Lucas, Spielberg, and the screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan. This conference allegedly took place on January 23rd to 27th, 1978. This document outlines a discussion between the three people as they break the story that would become Raiders of the Lost Ark. In that transcript, Spielberg is the one who brings up the boulder sequence, and, you guessed it, there's no mention of Scrooge McDuck anywhere in that document. By the way, Spielberg does confirm the story conference happened in an article from 1981. Unfortunately, the source of that transcript is unknown, and the actual recording of this conversation isn't available online. So, once again, this is not exactly proof, one way or another. With the available evidence on hand, it's pretty hard to suggest the Scrooge McDuck sequence inspired the iconic Raiders boulder scene, or for that matter, if it was an intentional homage to the comic. While George Lucas may have some familiarity with Scrooge McDuck, the originator of the sequence was Steven Spielberg. If one searches for an occasion where Spielberg discusses the sequence or anything to do with Scrooge McDuck, all one gets is a number of articles stating this homage as fact, confirmed by both Lucas and Spielberg. However, there's no citation whatsoever. There's no source material in the public record where either gentleman even discussed the comic. Which is odd considering that multiple articles on multiple websites state both have confirmed this multiple times. Yet, finding either of them mentioning Scrooge McDuck in any capacity is impossible to find. I know, some might say, obvious things are obvious. That's clearly a ripoff. It's hard to deny that both are very similar, almost identical, at least in spirit, if not execution. But that similarity doesn't rule out coincidence. Look, I'm just a self-professed geek with some free time, a microphone, and some software. I make no claim at being a journalist, or a reporter, or a historian, or whatever. Basically, I have zero credentials. To paraphrase The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I'm just some guy, you know? That being said, in my opinion, this piece of trivia is still a rumor. It's not an established fact, despite what's been loosely reported. If it were established, I wouldn't have spent 3 days reading, watching videos, and following links all over the internet to find the proof to back up this claim. It should have been easy. There should be citations. There should be quotes. I shouldn't have had to check every source from every article looking for the supporting evidence that doesn't appear to exist. In other words, obvious things are obvious. In the end, if one takes Edward Summer's quote on its surface, acknowledge that George Lucas and Summer were friends, add the fact that Lucas kind of co-wrote an introduction to a Scrooge McDuck book, then add that Lucas may have, at some undocumented point, said to Steven Spielberg that the boulder scene Spielberg suggested for the movie sounded like a scene from the comic, which both subsequently decided to pay homage to, then you have all the connections to suggest this may be factual. It's pretty shaky, and it's based on conjecture, but you'll have all you need to confirm this piece of trivia. Is it possible? Sure, why not? At a glance, it's not without validity, but it contains nothing but circumstantial evidence. So it's a neat possibility, but it certainly isn't a fact, and it could be a nifty coincidence. That being said, if anyone finds a source with either Lucas or Spielberg stating that the boulder sequence is a homage to Uncle Scrooge, I'll definitely look it over and do a follow-up video. At this point, it's not a closed case, but it's missing a vital piece of supporting evidence. I mean, I did a lot of poking around, but there may be something I missed. So if a clip or article is located, please post it in the comments below.